to the Scaling Japan podcast, a podcast about how to grow your business from $100,000 and beyond in the land of the rising sun.
Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Batino, and our guest today is Sylvain Pierre. He has scaled multiple companies and has created companies that people actually enjoy working for. Today, we will focus on the topics of scaling in general, but because we have Sylvain, I'd really like to dive in the topics of delegating and also hiring as a key component of scaling. So I'm really glad to have you on the podcast, Sylvain, and could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super happy to be with you today, Tyson. Great. So maybe I'll start with a very short self-introduction. You gave me 2 minutes for that. I think that's more than enough. So yeah, my name is Sylvain. I'm originally from France, as you may hear by my accent. I've been in Asia for over 15 years. So I first came to Asia. It was Vietnam in 2006. I moved right after I graduated from university. So I was 23 and discovering the world a little bit. And I joined a company as a founding member in Vietnam. So I spent 10 years working for that company. It was an amazing time. And we grew, since we're talking about growth today, we grew from 5 people in the beginning up to 300 people when I kind of left the company slowly. And I was back then really interested in Japan as well. And so little by little, I started coming over to Japan, discovering, meeting people, and eventually decided to move here in 2016. And originally I was opening the representative office of my Vietnamese company, but little by little I also discovered that I wanted to start something else. And so that's when I started Le Wagon in 2016, which I have been running since then. So it's been 5 years. It's been an amazing journey. I've had the chance to meet a ton of people here in Japan. And on the business side, we've had, I would say, successful 5 years. We've had 400 students graduating from our boot camps. And if you're interested in discovering more, you can also check out our websites. We're providing web development and data science boot camps here in Tokyo.
Can they just type Le Wagon Tokyo?
Yeah, Le Wagon Tokyo. Perfect. Yes, that's exactly what you want to type in Google.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember when you first came to Japan, I know you started doing events for Le Wagon. And I thought the timing was perfect because I think in 2016, there wasn't too many great networking events. And I think you guys and gals were the first one to create more theme-based, like around certain topics. So I think the community is very appreciative of that. And yeah, I've kind of seen it go from incubation now to one of the respected authorities for data science and coding boot camps in Japan. And yeah, so everyone on the channel, so when scaling your company, you usually go through the family stage. You might have 3 employees to around 10. Then you start to get to the tribe stage, like a small tribe or a big tribe. Then once you reach about 100, it's not exact, but things start to feel like a village and you need like a village chieftain. And I think Sylvain has experience going from the village stage and kind of building a company to the city stage. But so you created a really, really large company in Vietnam. So getting to the medium size. But could you tell us more about that company and also kind of break down some of the stages and like kind of the learning points you experienced?
So in towards the company was an outsourcing company. So pretty much IT outsourcing as well as business process. And so the company was established in Vietnam in 2006. So basically when I started there, over 10 years, we grew from 5, like I said, to the very small village stage, as you would call it, up to 300, which is a lot of people. We had 3 different offices all over the city and people working for a ton of different customers. So it's been quite an adventure. So I guess you'd like me maybe to explain a little bit the different stages or see if I have insights on like how we went through those growth stages.
Yeah, because a lot of the listeners, I think they're probably doing around probably less than $1 million in sales. They might have around 3 to 5 people, maybe even 10, but they really want to scale their company.
So one thing, maybe first of all, as an introduction, like hiring in Vietnam or growing in Vietnam is, well, first of all, a little bit easier than maybe some other countries, right? I've been running a company here in Japan and each and every hiring decision is a really big decision. Whereas in Vietnam, it's a bit easier. Salaries are, well, obviously much lower and So when you hire someone, it's not that big of a commitment. So you can grow a little bit easier, I would say. So that's maybe to put a little bit that experience in perspective. In terms of growth, so I think there are interesting steps, very interesting. So the very first step and going from the village to the slightly bigger organization, what was interesting is in the beginning, for the first maybe 6 months to a year, we were having those weekly meetings and the whole company could actually join the meetings, right? We could sit in a coffee shop. We would have lunch on Friday and Friday with the weekly meeting. And we were 15. So we started 5 and then 10 and then 15, 20. And then one day, not really kidding, one day we realized that we could not have everyone in the coffee shop anymore. And I think that was the end of the first stage. The interesting part as well, that at that time we were actually running the company from my co-founder's house. So he had a pretty big house in Vietnam and his plan was to, keep growing the company as much as possible in his house. And we also reached that stage where it could not happen. We would do meetings in his living room. And that was not viable anymore. His wife was going crazy. And at some point we decided to get our own office. So I think that marked kind of the end of the village stage. So maybe a little bit bigger than 10, but like 15 to 20 people where really everybody knows everybody. We all know what the other person is doing, and moving to the slightly bigger organization, new office and no more weekly meetings where everyone could be together. So that was a big change, I would say, the first big change.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's funny. I think everyone who has scaled their company, I think they can remember an exact moment where they had that mind shift. Like in your case, it was physically there wasn't any space. And I think in our case, it was like there's just too much information to share with people. And it's like, okay, we can't share everything anymore. We have to really think about it.
Yeah, definitely. So that's actually around that time when we moved to the next stage in terms of running the company. And like people do when they grow, they're going to stick to what they know or what seems to have worked. And so when you reach like 40, 50 people, what seems to have worked is to start adding layers of management, right? So you're like, okay, we're going to need a team leader, and then we're going to need a business unit manager, and then we're going to need like reports and things like that. So I think that was the second step. We ran the company like that for quite a long time, maybe 4 to 5 years. And so we would basically follow the like MBA 101 kind of way of running a company. So you had a HR department, you had managers, you had team leaders. You really needed all those roles and all those layers in the company. And in terms of actually running it and communicating about what was going on, well, we were also doing like very standard like monthly reports and annual evaluation and smart objectives and all of those things. I guess you're familiar with that as well, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I think once you reach that third tier where it's kind of like you have entry level, you have the managers, and the next stage after that, you kind of need all those reports to just keep everyone on the same page.
Yeah. I mean, I've come to realize it wasn't in the beginning, to be honest, I was really following that by the book. I think by the book is the right word. So just reading a ton of books about how to establish those reporting lines and then that management structure. And the book that was behind all of this, I believe back then, was a book by Jack Welch. I think it's called Winning, if I remember correctly. The cover of the book is going to look really silly and the name of the title of the book is horrible, but it's a very precise and very dense book about management. And if you're really into traditional structure, I recommend it because I did learn a lot from it.
We will have it in the notes, and I think your description describes every book he wrote.
Have you read anything from Jack Welch?
I haven't, but let's say the catchphrases have stuck in my mind. They're unforgettable.
Yeah. He's very sharp. And I did enjoy it quite a lot up until the point when I discovered another way to, let's say, run companies. And then I switched to that. But before then, yeah, Winning was my go-to book for everything management. So I think at that stage, when you reach 50 to 100, like smaller than 100, that's when you start needing like tools to communicate, right? Yeah, you need to find ways for the company to talk to, like for people to know what's going on in each team without necessarily having to have those weekly meetings with the whole company. And that's a tricky step. So back then, when we were running the company, there was no Slack. I think Slack has done a lot to improve that. I think Slack is an amazing tool, not only for chatting, because I would say most people use it for chatting, but then you have all of the integrations. I think this is really what makes power of Slack, like being able to integrate a lot of external services. That's what took Slack to the next level. I would say the majority of people just use it as a chat tool, but it's not a chat tool. It's really a tool that lets you integrate other services through APIs. That's really powerful. Slack wasn't around, so what we went for was we were all on the Google, so we used the Google social network, and we used it as our internal social network. We used Google Plus, which I think may have been discontinued, or it's maybe still running, but running very low.
I was about to confirm the name with you, but yes, I think it is out of commission. Google Plus.
Yeah. So since then, Facebook came up with something like Workplace, for example, which it does something pretty similar. And so the way we were communicating on Google Plus was we were trying to be as open as possible and posting like news and everything. And it worked quite well as an internal social network, I feel. And so that's the second stage where we went through a very traditional and very strict way to run the company. So like I mentioned, 6 months evaluations, a lot of different layers and annual reports and budgeting as well. I was doing a lot of budgeting. And at that stage, we took a slightly different route. We went in a slightly different direction. I think personally, as well as my other co-founders, we came to realization that not really what we wanted for the employees and for everyone who was working at the company. But even ourselves, we were kind of getting tired of doing things that we felt did not add a lot of value, like budgeting and evaluation, especially for me, evaluation. I felt like evaluation, I was spending a lot of time with that, like evaluating people. And I felt it was kind of like that forced exercise that you have to do, but actually nobody is happy about it. Like,
yeah, you're trying to force it into that every 6-month period. And like everybody knows about it like a couple months in advance. It's like a major event of the year, but not one that, or no one's looking forward to it.
Yeah. Nobody really likes it. And it's kind of not, I wouldn't say cheating your way through those. You know, you want to look good, right? And so as an employee, you're reporting to someone and then you want to look good. So you're, not necessarily lying, but trying to like give good things or show good things. And then as a manager, well, you pretty much already have an idea, and it's very tough to keep an open mind about what your employee is showing you because you already have an opinion roughly about what that person is doing. So the whole exercise felt a little bit pointless. That was one thing. And then budgeting felt also like a lot of time wasted. Annual reports, all of this, at least for us, for the management team, it felt really, really like a waste of time. And so that's when we took a completely different turn and we decided to embrace something called, so there are different names for it, but we call it open organization. So some people call it flat organization. Some people call it the liberated company. That's more of the French terminology. And the idea behind that was to, get rid of all those time-consuming tasks and to give more ownership to each and every person in the company. And at that stage, we were quite a lot bigger. We were 150, 200 people already. And I think that helped us save time and get people more engaged into what we were doing. So that links a little bit to how much culture you need when running a company or what culture does to the company.
Gotcha. It makes perfect sense because, the top down, it can work for some organizations, but you really need to have someone who knows how to implement that and will probably has had a lot of experience implementing it seriously. But yeah, definitely, or at least from my thoughts, if I was advising a company, like I know it won't go good for at least, or if they try top down, it won't go good for at least multiple years.
So yeah, it depends a little bit on the deal you have. Like you can do top down while still staying close with your employees. And there are some organizations that are top down that work really well. So the idea of top down is it came from the 70s, from the 80s, right? It came from the fact that companies were growing and you didn't have powerful communication tools. Right? You didn't have, computers were already around, but people were not using computers to talk to each other, right? Things like Skype or Slack, it came way, way later, right? And so the top-down system came in because you needed to know what everybody in the company was doing. And the only way to do that was to have those layers of management. So communication tools, Skype and Slack and emails and all of this allowed you to or allows us to remove those layers of management, because the role of a manager is just controlling information or like transferring or transmitting information. But that's pretty much it, or it's a big part of the role of a manager, right?
I would say, yeah, it's one of the top three roles.
One of the top three. There are, of course, like, running teams, like motivating people. There is a coaching aspect. A big part of it is like transferring information. When you're in a factory and you have a line manager, the line manager is basically counting how many products you produced on that day and just bringing that up to the management. And that's pretty much it. I mean, at least that's a big part of their job. And so once you have tools to communicate better, once you can establish that seamless communication, you don't necessarily need those intermediary levels anymore. So I think that's something that some people started to understand, and then they just got rid of management lines because they didn't feel the need to it.
Cool. No, thank you for sharing. I think you definitely gave some very good tips and also a breakdown of what happens when you scale.
Like what you're listening to and ready to scale your company? Let Tyson coach you and your team to make the jump. You can find more information about our coaching and advisory services at www.scalingyourcompany.com. Now, back to our podcast.
I would actually like to ask you some of the same questions for Le Wagon. Like, it's kind of like, what are the growth stages that you've been through since founding it to, I'll say, scaling it, I think, until across multiple locations in Japan now?
So the stages were more for us adding new programs and adding new formats, right? So we started with the full-time web development. And so with that one, we were having maybe 40 students per year. And then we started adding a part-time option, and then we started adding data science and then data science part-time. So all of this adding up, we grew from 40-ish students per year to over 100 students per year currently. So those were more the stages of growth for us. So the team itself, the core team is not huge, to be honest. It's below 10 right now. So we don't have a 30 people organization. However, we work with quite a lot of freelancer, so people gravitating around the company. And that's maybe another aspect that I would like to emphasize on or to showcase for people who are looking to grow, is that
Go for it.
This is something that's a little bit new, like being able to hire someone, to work with someone, but not necessarily having that person full-time on your payroll. I think this is something that's very new, and it's true even within the Wagon, even the core team, our employees. All of our employees have something going on the side. And at first you might feel, well, I don't necessarily want my employees to work for another company or to have a side gig or to do something on the side. But at the end of the day, it's inevitable, and you cannot control that as the person running the company. And so I felt that accepting that our employees started doing something else on the side was it helped us grow as well. And it helps us keep people around longer, because if they realize that they cannot do everything they want, they might just leave in the end, right? If a company starts approaching them and saying, hey, why don't you work for us? And they say, well, yeah, that looks interesting, so I'm going to go work for that company instead of working for the Wagon. So letting them do those side activities actually allows us to keep them around, to grow them as people, and to actually a very solid team.
Do you feel that offering something like that is very important these days to attract a diverse team?
I think it's something you need to keep in mind when you're trying to hire people. So not necessarily offering it openly on your job description, like, oh, it's okay if you have something on the side. But for me, a lot of the people I approach, a lot of the freelancers I approach, they already have something. They already are working on some activity. Maybe they even have a full-time job. But I don't take this as a, no, I cannot work with them. I just take this as, okay, we have to work around that, but still it's a possibility that we can find a possibility, a way to work together. So what it did for me is that it turned every person out there into a potential employee, if you see what I'm saying, or into a potential person who can work for me at some point. I don't have any limitations in terms of that. It's like, you're working for a company? Yeah, fine. Come and work with us maybe on the weekend or in the evening. And that opened up so many more opportunities for me. And so I was saying the core team is less than 10 people today, but the number of people we're working with at Le Wagon is maybe over 30 right now. And a lot of those people have part-time jobs, full-time jobs, they have side activities, they're working as freelancer, but they still stay with us and stick with us and they enjoy working with us.
Thanks for sharing that. No, I think that was an important point to mention that nowadays, because you can hire people outside of Japan or you can hire people from different parts of Japan, you're not restricted to, let's say, gathering 20, 30 people in one office building at all times. There's much more variety in the ways you scale your hiring.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's so hiring is one topic I definitely wanted to talk to you about because a lot of time we've spoken, let's say, making sure you have like, the right cultural fit and just culture is actually a key component for scaling. But yeah, so if we're on the topic of hiring, I guess what are some common mistakes you see first-time founders make in regards to hiring and kind of like some solutions for those points?
Right. So I'm going to have a bold comment here. I'm going to
Sweet. The bolder, the better.
Yeah. I have a hard time. So I would say HR department, but specifically like the recruiting side of HR departments. I think that it's a gigantic mistake to have all of the recruiting power consolidated into just the hands of a few people. And the more you grow, the harder it becomes because those people, they don't know everything about your business. And you're going to have a bigger and bigger variety of teams that are recruiting. And everything is kind of bottlenecked through that one hiring team. And I actually don't blame it on them that hiring is so hard for them. I just blame it on the companies that organize. It's like, well, we have a team of 5 people who is hiring for like 200 or 300. So I think this is a gigantic mistake. And I think a way to go around that is to kind of delegate or spread the responsibility of hiring throughout the whole company. So there are many ways to do that, many levels. You could still have an HR department, but those are not always they're not in charge of the full process from A to Z. At some point, it needs to go back to the team that's actually hiring to interview people and then to make the final decision. I think they should be the one, like the team hiring should be the one in charge of the final decision. That's one level. But if you go even further into that direction, you could even say, well, now everyone in the company is hiring and everyone can make a hiring decision. We don't necessarily need any hiring department anymore. And then that has 2 advantages. First of all, I think it's going to make your hiring process maybe a little bit smoother and the fit is going to be much better. And when I talk about the fit, and that's my second point, the cultural fit is going to be super strong. Because who are the best representative of your company culture than your employees and every single one of your employees? So I feel like giving or transferring not the responsibility, but the power to hire to each and every employee is maybe the next step when it comes to hiring and growing.
Gotcha. So I know it's usually recruitment can be in charge of sourcing and screening. Let's say the department that the person will work for will be the one making the hiring decision. Have you ever tried or heard of a company trying to even take the sourcing and screening elements to the department they're going to work for?
So there are definitely examples. I don't have names in mind, so that makes the point a little bit moot. But yeah, I think it's doable. We've done that with our Vietnamese company, with our company in Vietnam. We told each and every employee, if you have friends you want to recommend or to hire, just bring them in. You can interview them, you have the rest of the team interview them and then can bring them in. So I don't have a name for like large company that has done that. To be honest, I actually looked that up. I'm pretty sure they are.
But now I was thinking about it because I think one advantage to that system that I really like is sometimes it's hard to ask employees to refer their friends when they're going to the standard recruitment department. But if they're going to be doing the interview process, they know that their friend is going to be taken care of very well. So it removes a lot of barriers for introducing your friends to work in the company you work for.
Right. And at the end of the day, companies have those recommendation system with incentives. So they have to pay their employees like 500,000 yen, 1,000,000 yen to recommend someone. So the idea would be, why not make that for every single person and try to spread it and try to make it your one and only hiring scheme or hiring structure? Because when you're working for a team, at the end of the day, if your team cannot hire, like your team is going to underperform. So it is somehow part of your responsibility, part of your scope of work to make sure that your team is growing as well. So another aspect is, you mentioned that recruiters within a company, their role is to source candidates. And The case about having each and every employee sourcing new people is one employee today, if you look on LinkedIn, one employee is going to have 200, 300, maybe 500, for the most 1,000 people they're connected to, right? And then you multiply that number by the numbers of employees you have, and suddenly you have a view at the reach you have just through LinkedIn, just looking at your own employees. And that reach, no recruiting departments will manage to get that reach. So if you take 20 employees, you do 20 employees times 300, you already have a recruiting department doesn't have that reach.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, there's no organic reach for the internal recruitment department unless you're working for Google, but not for the rest of us. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And essentially the recruitment department, because they don't have that reach, they have to go to external recruiters, or you have to go through job boards, but which isn't the best way to, or it's hard to communicate your company's message through a job board, or I would say you can't effectively.
Yeah, external recruiter is a whole nother topic as well. Maybe we don't want to dive into that one today.
Yeah, I was thinking we might have to invite you again multiple times. There's just so much to talk about. And I also like hearing your philosophy when it comes to hiring and building an internal company structure. Yeah, so I was going to ask, did you have any other thoughts on hiring other than external recruiters?
So other than trying to make your employees responsible for it, maybe another thought or maybe another recommendation. There is a really, really good book about hiring that's been written by the former, I think he was VP of HR at Google. And
Laszlo, maybe. Laszlo
yes,
something.
Yeah, that's his name. Laszlo Block, I believe, or Block. And the book is called Work Rules. And there is a pretty big chapter in it about hiring and how they try to remove also subjectivity to hiring. And I strongly recommend that book. It gave me quite a lot of ideas as well about how to hire. Over the past 5 years, actually, since I've been running away, I don't think I've posted any ads or any job offer. All the hiring that's been done for us has been connections of connections, or people I've met, or recommendations from someone I know. That recommendation from someone you know already creates a lot of trust. So that's been my motto. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess usually if the company, if they don't have that network already, or let's say if they don't have a solid reputation, you pretty much, your only option is really to try to get as much applicants as possible. But I think the beauty of the structure you have is that every person who usually applies, you won't have to have a recruitment department just to try to make sure you get as much people as possible, and you can just focus on the right people. So I think that's pretty cool.
Exactly. I said I haven't posted any job ads. That's not true. We did specifically for marketing interns, and it was a massive failure. I've interviewed maybe 10, 15 different people, and it just didn't work out. It was, for the most part, applicants who had never heard of Le Wagon, who had no clue what we were doing, who were just so disconnected from our environment and our values that it just didn't work out. It didn't make sense for me to interview those people. When we were talking, it was clear that they did not understand our business. So
yeah, and I guess the knowledge that they don't have then creates an onboarding burden. But if they already know you in advance, the onboarding process and just getting them ready up to action goes so much smoother, or it solves so much problems in advance.
Yeah, that's particularly true for marketing. But generally speaking, when someone joins your company, you want them to know as much as possible and to ideally embrace your causes or your values. That's an important part. Yes.
Cool. So I think we didn't have enough time to really dive into delegation, but I think that might be a good topic for next time. But I guess, do you have any, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I can talk 2-3 minutes if you have a specific question, but I do have something to share about it as well.
I guess it's a topic I like to dive deeply, but if you have maybe 2 bits of knowledge, 1 or 2 bits of quick knowledge, that would be cool.
Right. So I think you can probably call it common knowledge. So the main idea that I have is delegation has a lot to do with trust, right? I think it's extremely strongly connected. An approach that I've had for quite a while now is to approach employees or people that come to me, not necessarily employees, but everyone who's outside and trying to connect with me. I try to have that trust first approach. And that's true as well for everything that's linked to delegations. It's trying to trust people to do things, really. So an interesting point is that the few people that I've met who were struggling to grow were actually micromanaging quite a lot. So I think there is that extremely strong link between being able to delegate and being able to grow. If not, that's the main point. If you cannot delegate, you won't be able to grow.
Yeah, I usually see companies, they just stop growing at like 8 to 10 people.
Yes.
Or if it's at 20 people, like it's a lot of pain and suffering for everyone involved.
Yes. So the trick is learning how to trust is a very long process.
I mean, it's an everyday thing that needs to be done to develop. And it's trust is, it's like, I guess it's a diamond. Once you have it, it's very valuable. Or sorry, maybe diamond's not a good one, but it can break easily if you drop it. But it takes a really long time to build up.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's maybe part of your coaching sessions as well. Like, do you actually coach on delegation and trust, or?
Actually, yes. I think for my case, it's one, it's kind of understanding as a founder, like how are you actually spending your time? And the other one is like with the things you're spending on your time on, can you actually delegate it to someone else? Then creating a format for that. Because like, I think one problem I see is think delegating is black and white. It's like, I passed it to you, therefore you're fully operational on it. But it's kind of like coaching founders. It's like, no, delegating is actually like a 4 or 5 step process. And I try to develop trust as actually a part of the delegation, because if you just pass it to someone, you kind of break the trust there. It's kind of like, I don't want to do it here, do it. Screw you sometimes. But it's more like, but if you make it a 5 step, you can see that, okay, I'm on stage 1, but you're going to help me to get to stage 5. So I would like to accept this task because I trust you're going to help me get there. As opposed to like, I want to delegate something to you. And it's like, oh, actually, I'm not sure if I really want to do it. So I think if you can build trust through the design of the delegation process, I think it makes it a lot easier to give more tasks in the future when you want to reduce your tasks and focus on, things like marketing, sales, or PR as a CEO.
Yeah, it's a very deep topic. Like picking also what to delegate, and something you delegate may not be done properly according to your standards, because there is also subjectivity to it. But then looking back at it, you can think, oh, actually, that wasn't the right thing to delegate to that person, or maybe that person wasn't properly empowered, or maybe the objectives were not clearly set as well. So it's a very, very deep topic. I agree with you that when I meet companies that are not growing a lot, like that are 8 to 10 people, I feel like delegation and trust is the biggest issue.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of times, like, you're not going to be lucky to find like your right-hand man or woman who's like a powerhouse operator. So oftentimes you will have to delegate things to the team around you and help build them up. So I think delegating is super important, especially if you want to get to like about the 20 to 50 stage of employees.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, it's kind of like entrusting others is that big component, but also developing a process system where it's kind of like exactly like you described, like finding the right person. If it's not, maybe delegating to someone else, or other aspects is like, rather than delegating, maybe there's some tasks you just should stop doing. So just because you kind of want to pass something on. And I think that's another key point. It's that you shouldn't delegate purely just because you don't want to do something. A key component is by delegating this aspect, are you going to help develop this person into a future manager or even potential future director in the future? So I think one trap that many founders find themselves is, I want to do this, therefore I don't want to do that, therefore I should pass this to other people.
Rather than, I trust you enough to do that one thing that's super critical for the company, and maybe I think it's the role of the CEO, but actually I want to give it to you.
And in the future, you can grow into this position and we can continue growing together. Yeah, this has been a great episode. And before I finish it off, I would like you to share where people can find you and maybe go over what services you're offering again.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on pretty much every social network. I'm particularly active on LinkedIn if you want to find me there, as well as passively reading Twitter, but I do have accepting connections on Twitter too. So find me there. In terms of what we offer, so again, the Wagon Tokyo is coding bootcamp here in Tokyo, and we offer web development as well as data science bootcamps in 2 formats, so full-time and part-time. So for those of you out there who may not be able to dedicate full-time to tech education.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. And we definitely would like to have you on the podcast again.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for having me. I hope some of the sharing was useful to people out there. Happy to be doing this again anytime.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to share this with my clients as well. I think there's a lot of learnings, and it also it emphasizes a lot of what I'm trying to teach them as well.
Great. I'm happy that I was following your message. That wasn't planned, right? We improvised all of this, right?
We totally improvised everything. Take it easy.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the end of the podcast. We appreciate you listening to the end of this Scaling Japan episode. And if you would like more great episodes on scaling your business in Japan, please check out www.scalingyourcompany.com/podcast.